Sam Cooper testifies. Welcome back to Moose on Loose. My name's David. Today we got Sam Cooper in the Ethics and Conflicts of Interest Committee testifying, giving his insight into Mark Carney and his connections to China. I was also invited to this committee. I'll tell you why I didn't participate. Let's jump into this. We've got Sam Cooper testifying here today on Mark Carney's Beijing connections. I should note there's a bunch of you mentioning, has Pierre seen my stuff, all that kind of stuff. Yes, they did invite me to testify today. The reason I'm not is because they essentially gave me one business day notice, and by the time I saw the email, it was already too late. You have to send a bunch of links in advance so they translate everything over to French so everyone can review the documents. Even in going through the email and everything, you have to have a very specific headset. I can't just use this professional setup I have right now. You have to have an approved headset, and even getting one ordered, I wouldn't have been able to get the headset ordered in time for where I live here on Vancouver Island out in the sticks to be able to participate. I was trying to go through here and figure out like which articles would I be putting up. Would I make a list of 100 or 200 or how many do I submit? I was trying to figure out the whole situation with the headset. Can I go buy one locally? How do I get one? If I order off Amazon, it'll take too long. Then I eventually saw the cutoff date and I was already past the cutoff date. I should note too, I don't reply to most of my emails because there's just so many, but I do read them. But it does take some time. We're going to start this off with Michael Cooper questioning Sam Cooper on Carney and his business dealings in China.
Brookfield has significant investments in Beijing state-linked enterprises, more than $3 billion of investments, correct?
Correct.
And during his tenure as chair of Brookfield, Mark Carney played a significant role in expanding Brookfield's footprint in the PRC, correct?
Recalling my research, his work into, I believe it was green power businesses with connections to China was an expansion, yes.
Was involved in the refinancing in 2019 in relation to Shanghai commercial real estate worth billions.
That investment continued into his time taking over an executive role with Brookfield, yes.
And would it be fair to characterize Brookfield's investments in the PRC as politically sensitive?
In my view, as an expert on China's United Front system, as I said before, the nature of that real estate investment and the other parties involved, I do believe it would very much touch on the Chinese Communist Party's control.
And so would it be accurate to say that the Beijing-based communist regime has a significant amount of leverage over Brookfield with respect to its investments, and that if Brookfield wants to make a return on its investments, it would be very much in Brookfield's interest to maintain a good relationship with the Beijing-based communist regime? I think that would be fair, wouldn't it?
At a basic level, I do think it's fair that international business persons, even of the type of Michael Bloomberg, have been recognized to take into consideration the Communist Party's wishes, yes.
Something about that, Michael Bloomberg. It's funny that Sam Cooper uses that example because Mark Carney's, the boards he used to sit on, some of these I don't know if he's still on them. He definitely resigned from some of them, but you can see right at the top here, Bloomberg. He sat on the chair of Bloomberg, chair of board of directors from August 2023 to January 2025. It's funny he used that example when Bloomberg as a company had Mark Carney as one of the chair of board of directors.
We have a prime minister who has significant financial interests tied to Brookfield, worth millions, and we have Brookfield in turn being deeply intertwined with a communist regime based in Beijing. On a broad level, shouldn't that concern Canadians vis-a-vis the Prime Minister in fulfilling his duty to put Canada's interests first when his private financial interests in Brookfield are deep, which in turn is deeply intertwined with the PRC?
In fairness, I think business analysts would say it's almost impossible for international business persons to not be doing business with Chinese state entities in some ways. But I do think it's fair to say if a company has a very strong balance towards businesses in China, such as the real estate investment or the green investments I've talked about, Canadians should be aware of that, definitely.
And Mark Carney, as recently as October of 2024, while he was advising the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, as his economic advisor, went over to Beijing, met with, in secret meetings, among others, the deputy governor of Beijing's central bank, and 2 weeks later secures a $250 million loan from Brookfield. Not anyone can just do that, can they? Unless they have significant ties with the regime at the highest levels.
There's no question. I noted the timeline of that visit to China end the deal, securing funding from the Bank of China. It's not to say that there's a definite tie there, but the timing is interesting and I think relevant.
Mark Carney had been working those connections with Beijing officials for years, even going back to his days as the governor of the Bank of England.
I just want to ask you about Brookfield's real estate investments. You referenced an individual who is connected to the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, which the CIA has identified as a United Front entity. That individual is Vincent Lo, correct?
That's correct.
And Vincent Lo served as Brookfield's primary real estate partner, or one of their primary partners in the region, right?
To my recollection, he was a key partner on that development.
And Lo would have played that role during the time that Carney was chair at Brookfield, involved in real estate in the PRC, right?
If the structure of the deal continues, which I believe so, that would be the case.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
Yeah, there's a lot of ties over there. Brookfield's deep ties to Chinese land loans and green deals. So this is essentially what he's pulling his knowledge from. A review of corporate documents reveals that Brookfield, the influential 900 billion Canadian investment fund from which Liberal Prime Minister-to-be Mark Carney stepped away in order to replace Justin Trudeau as Canada's leader, maintains over $3 billion in political sensitive investments with Chinese state-linked real estate and energy companies. But there's no conflicts of interest, not at all.
Maintain over $3 billion in politically sensitive investments connected to China and its state-linked real estate and energy companies. Can you explain how Prime Minister Carney's role in Brookfield's ties to the regime in China?
Sure, I'll go off memory of my own reporting. Thinking of that story, which I wrote in the lead up to the federal election, I researched into Brookfield's investments in China, and on the real estate file, I noted that after 2015, Brookfield had made very substantial China-based real estate investments, and due to my knowledge of Beijing's United Front networks, I noted that one of the key Hong Kong investors connected to the projects in which Brookfield was investing was part of China's Political Consultative Conference. That was important to me because the Central Intelligence Agency notes that people on that high-level Chinese communist entity are involved, the CIA says, in Beijing's sort of global United Front networks. That's how the Chinese Communist Party brings influential people together. So I noted in my reporting that for Brookfield to get access to that same type of investment project on a major real estate deal in China, together with a very elite Hong Kong real estate tycoon, certainly in my learned opinion, it would take a special kind of access to get that kind of deal. So then tracking forward through when Prime Minister Carney joins Brookfield, in the surrounding years, I noted that the real estate market in China had plummeted. At some point, Brookfield needed to secure some, let's call it sort of a re-injection of capital. And it turned out that it emerged that the Bank of China, as others have reported, was involved in bridging some capital to re-infuse that deal in China's troubled real estate market. So stepping back from that, I noted that people in Mr. Carney's position in Brookfield's, Mr. Carney also traveling to China to meet with senior Communist Party officials around the timing of the Bank of China, assisting Brookfield with their real estate investment. That would certainly, in my mind, raise, the questions around access and influence.
Yeah, so he's spot on here. Sam's research is excellent. Mark Carney has a lot of ties with Xi Jinping. I mean, there he is with Xi Jinping when he went there last year to secure that big loan. He went there as a U.S. business leader. This guy's invested 91% in America, and now he's not getting a deal with America. Something stinks. We shouldn't forget that Xi Jinping and the CCP were campaigning for Mark Carney to win as prime minister. That's essentially what this says here. All over Chinese media. Mark Carney is now being endorsed worldwide as future leader of the Liberal Party by the CCP-dominated Chinese media outlets, particularly the party's mouthpiece, People.cn. Just Mark Carney hanging around with China Chamber of Commerce in the UK meetings, having private chats with some of the most senior Chinese Communist Party officials. Here he is having his face broadcasted by the Canada-China Business Council. And who else is there? Dominic Barton, McKinsey. They got hundreds of millions of dollars from taxpayers, Asian Infrastructure Bank. This is all grift.
Mr. Carney was the chair at Brookfield during that time. Then he enters public office. You talk about his ties, relationships with the regime in China. Is there any evidence to suggest that those ties have been maintained since he's entered elected office?
In my research focusing on Brookfield, which is the nature already in previous testimony, I heard Brookfield and Mr. Carney's 103 potential investment vulnerabilities come up. Look, my work is based on open source investigations, and Mr. Carney, I noted in the timeline back to his days with the Bank of England, had worked on establishing a special relationship between the Bank of England and the Bank of China, and which is, of course, controlled by the Chinese Communist Party in terms of global monetary systems. So I felt that was important as a researcher. Through the years, Mr. Carney, when he joins Brookfield, prior to entering politics, repeatedly travels to Beijing and meets with senior officials, including President Xi Jinping. And I noted that for business persons at that time of Mr. Carney's stature to appear with Xi Jinping, again, as China's economy is in need of foreign investment, and while investments into China are becoming more dangerous in the view of some Western capitalists, having Mr. Carney be in those meetings, I do think is important. And you could say fairly is beneficial to Xi Jinping, as it would be beneficial to Mark Carney, the business person, in his time at Brookfield. So when we enter Mr. Carney's race to become the Liberal nominee for Prime Minister, I did note that as the Globe and Mail broke the story that Mr. Carney met with an entity called the Jiangsu Chamber of Commerce in Toronto, I was very aware already that Commerce Department had overt ties to the United Front Work Department. And indeed, politically connected Canadians are honorary chairs with that entity. So I do think there's much reporting that hasn't come out on exactly what the Jiangsu Chamber of Commerce is and what Mr. Carney's meeting, which he denied at first, as you know, he denied elements of the Globe and Mail's reporting. So there's controversy around what really happened in that meeting.
Not only did he deny it, then the government had that website taken down. That's interesting, Sam, bringing up that Xi Jinping would bring over Carney. It brings credibility, bringing in this globalist banker, thus attracting more investment from Western countries over to China. It's a win-win situation there. As for the Jiangsu Commerce, we've got it here. Well, the government did have this website deleted. It's backed up. You can't get rid of this stuff. It's right here on the Wayback Machine. There it is. So they have his full page here on Mark Carney praising the guy. You can see shaking hands, grip and grin, grip and grin. It's all here. And even if they delete this, I have the original footage on my video that I could pull up if I needed to. Moving ahead, we've got Liberal here trying to discredit Sam Cooper. This is probably the dumbest thing one of these Liberals has ever tried in committee.
Journalist does not always have the same standards for verification as our parliamentary work. There are anonymous tips, for example, and could give the impression of truth without being fully verified. Many have noted for your work, Mr. Cooper, and I'm not a specialist there, that some of your conclusions are based on hypotheses that can have various interpretations. We would prefer things to be irrefutable truths. This does not undermine your commitment, but highlights that parliamentarians need to have an analysis set in context. Research needs to be done, and sometimes impact matters more than rigorously verifying facts.
This guy's got some nerve saying irrefutable truth. Sam Cooper has uncovered the Vancouver model of street candy laundering going on in Vancouver, and these guys don't even want to shut that down. Not only that, but Sam's work has stood up to CSIS scrutiny. He's the most credible investigative journalist in Canada.
I also believe that we can't have simplified conclusions. Our responsibility is not to react to the story of the day, but to have strong policies based on facts. I would like to now ask you a question, Mr. Cooper. You have written a lot on interference and transparency. And so my question is as follows. How can, in the public space, we better seek a better balance between investigative journalism and at the same time not undermining the Canadians' trust in our institutions?
Well, what kind of dumb question is that? If the government is being corrupt, they need to be called out, not handled with kid gloves because they're highly corrupt. This is the dumbest question I think I've ever heard on committee, ever.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Chair. The question brings to my mind the central issue for this hearing is whether impartiality of the Ethics Commissioner and the Privy Council Office Clerk are sufficient to provide Canadians with the confidence that the ethics screens in place for our prime ministers, cabinet ministers, will work very simply. And so in my own research, some of you will know, I started as a reporter in British Columbia. My work led to the Cullen Commission into anti-money laundering. And Justice Cullen, who credited my investigations and savvy reporting and questioning with leading to that commission, one of his top 3 recommendations was that the British Columbia government had effectively demonstrated that they needed an independent anti-money laundering commissioner who did not report to the premier or serve at the pleasure of the premier's cabinet, because there was simply a loss of trust that BC would be able to police its own money laundering institutions.
Mais avant d'aller
And
plus
I
loin,
say, I say the same issue here. It relates to Ethics Commission in Ottawa. I think there's enough reporting that Canadians have very valid questions.
See that? He tried to shut him down. Sam's like, no, we're not having you shut this down when I start talking about money laundering in the BC and having independent body that is not connected to the premier, because we know full well who's the premier right now, David Eby, and who's been calling this out, Sam Cooper. He's the one who brought this up. Ding Guo is David Eby's advisor. You can see here right on Sam Cooper's own website. There's David Eby and Ding Guo. Ding Guo is connected to the United Front Work Department, an arm of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. So is there a reason why there's so much money laundering and street candy cartels, all that going on? Are certain people allowing this to happen in our country? These are the questions we should be asking here. And this section here on China and Chinese connections on my chart here desperately needs work. I've got a whole bunch of notes and things I need to add on here. I just need some time to do so. But the key takeaway from this is when these guys start interrupting, that's where you need to dig more. And he just did it when Sam was mentioning BC money laundering, having an independent body, all of that. They're telling us where the next story is going to be.